Hey guys, welcome back to SourceFedNERD. I'm Filup Molina, and recently I got addicted to watching a very specific video again and again and again and again, and I think some of you have this same addiction. It's the Marvel behind-the-scenes teaser for Avengers Infinity War. When this movie comes out, 18 movies will have been leading up to that moment. 10 years will have passed since we first met the MCU and this particular grouping of Marvel heroes. And so obviously, the only storyline worth all of that buildup is the Avengers taking on Thanos in Infinity War. Damn, I just realized I'm gonna cry in public when this happens. So, while I can't make time go any faster, Agamotto knows I've tried, I can dive into one of the few things we do know about this movie, and that's what the hell Thanos is up to. Or more specifically, what the Hela he's hoping to be up in. If you're familiar with the comics, you know that Thanos has a huge crush on the literal embodiment of death, and in an effort to impress Mistress Death and get her to accept his love, he gathers the Infinity Gems, combines them into his fancy Infinity Gauntlet, and then wields all of their various powers in order to bring about a lot of actual death. And he takes out some really big guns in that story. I'm not gonna spoil that actually. Now, we've heard some mixed things about this storyline being adapted directly for the MCU, and especially this concept of Mistress Death showing up. The character actually has film rights, and they actually are owned by Marvel, but still it's a very complicated one to introduce. Also, I know that I would be really bummed if they had her and didn't have a way to feature Deadpool, who she totally has this really fun relationship with, like that's what she said quoting kind of relationship, really. But you know, since Deadpool's film rights belong to Fox and they're not gonna let go of those anytime soon, I don't know if that'll happen. So, first big change. What might happen instead is that Thanos will have a lady friend he is pursuing, but instead of it being Death, she'll be the goddess of Hell, aka Hela. This character already has an entrance planned later this same year in Thor Ragnarok, and that's actually who Cate Blanchett is playing. We actually just got badass concept art of her too, and dude, Thanos, I totally see it. It reminds me of when I had a crush on Kerrigan from StarCraft after the Zerg mutation. The heart wants what it wants. I'm not sure any of these characters have hearts, by the way. Also, I'm gonna mention, and this is quasi-breaking news, they might not use any of the unrequited lover stuff. According to the writer of Doctor Strange, who is not necessarily the utmost authority on Infinity War, but has some weight to throw around, he's saying that Thanos just wants to rebalance the universe as he sees it. So when he figures out that the Infinity Stones could help him do that with the snap of a finger, that becomes his main goal. All right, so it's clear, no matter what, we're gonna be getting some changes, and I'm fine with that actually. The main things I wanna catch us up on are those gems he's collecting, hopefully to impress Hela, because I think that's a lot of fun, but for whatever reason he is. And that brings us to another change. Right off the bat, they aren't gems in the MCU, they're stones. Now that's not too big a deal because they weren't even originally called Infinity Gems either. At first they were Soul Gems, but then Thanos thought Infinity was a better name, so we go with that. So right, they're called Infinity Stones now, and each one of them is just a little different than what they were in the comics. And also, more interestingly, their status and location are very different. So great, we've got all that context, and now I'm gonna retell the entire history of the MCU in chronological order, but only the stuff that we get to see in the movies. And here's the big caveat, only focusing on the journey that the Infinity Stones themselves go on. Okay, so here goes. MCU from the perspective of a bunch of rocks. We start at the beginning of time, but like right after the universe exploded into existence. There were 6 singularities, and the great cosmic entities turned these into Infinity Stones. Each stone represents a different element of the universe. The Collector taught us that these stones can only be brandished by really powerful beings, and so in the very distant past, the orb was used by Celestials as a means of placing judgment upon entire worlds. Now it's called the orb, it looks like an orb, but from here on out, let's know it as the Power Stone, and that's what it does. It unleashes insane power on worlds, like just by touching them. Actually, anyone who even touches it could be destroyed themselves. So since we're going in chronological order, we're gonna keep on moving, but just remember the Power Stone is hanging out as an executioner's weapon for the Celestials in the distant past. They hide it in a secret tomb under an ocean. Just don't worry about it for a while. Now, a long time later, like millions of years later, we take a stroll over to the 9 realms. Hint, eventually it's gonna be Thor territory. There's this guy you might recognize, his name is Malachite. He's got an army of dark elves, and he decides he's gonna wield the Aether. This is like 2988 BC, by the way. Now, the Aether, it's actually not even in stone form, though it probably used to be, but we don't know how that changed, it just did. And it could maybe go back to being that way, which is good for Thanos, because I don't think fiery blood lava would just like hang out on his glove, you know? Anyway, back to Malachite. The Asgardians of that time do their job of guarding everyone's asses, and they yoink the Aether away from Malachite before he can use it to transform worlds, which is the power the Aether has so far. I'm gonna be honest, it's been a little bit of a vague one. Now, if we connect it back to the comics, this is the equivalent to the reality gem. But the only caveat I'll say is that the movies haven't really explored what that means. Like, there's something about how it could make the universe be undone, but in the comics, this one can do anything. It's basically like a genie. It can grant any wish, no matter what. You can make alternate realities with this thing. Theoretically, Thanos could enter this universe and stand right next to me if he wanted. But again, they haven't really gotten into all that in the movies. Not that they won't, but so yeah. The Asgardians hide the Aether away, and no one knows where it is for at least a long while. Okay, now real quick, I want to mention that there are other stones out there just changing hands and floating around, but they don't really cover that time in the movies much, so we won't either. So let's just go ahead and jump forward roughly 5,000 years, and that brings us to right around World War II. There's this dude, Hitler. He totally sucks. And he's got a right-hand man who is fascinated by this kind of history. Hint, Red Skull. And he keeps hearing about this thing called the Tesseract. Now, we won't get all into it, but by chance, because Odin thought it would be a good idea for some reason, he actually left the Tesseract on Earth. It's just hanging out in some old church. Now, Hydra decides to go after it, but they're big dummies. They're thinking it's gonna be like some sort of big battery or something. They're really underestimating this thing. Anyway, this is where our first Avenger fits in, because Captain America, pre-getting frozen, ends up in the mix here and stops these guys from using the Tesseract to destroy a bunch of military targets and thwarts their world domination attempt, whatever. So this red numbskull, who is all pissed now, he gets so mad he finally touches the Tesseract, gropes it even, and boom, he gets thrown through a portal across space, and that's the moment we realize that's not a battery, you idiot. This is the Space Stone. It can teleport you through space, but at the full potential of its power, it can actually make you omnipresent, as in you're everywhere, all at the same time. In practice, it would look like instantaneous speed. Okay, so in that chaos, the Tesseract fell way down into the Arctic Ocean, and so did Captain America, but he's not the point here. We're following the shiny cube. And so is one Mr. Howard Stark, creator of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony. And he finds it and keeps it with S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time, like 70 years. And that brings us to our lifetime, unless you're really, really, really young. Because in 2012, there was this whole little alien invasion on Earth. They were called the Chitauri, you might have heard of them. Well, they were actually serving, silent drumroll please, Thanos. And that's right, he's already after the stones at this point and sent the Chitauri along with Loki to get the Tesseract from Earth. And because Thanos wanted to give Loki an extra leg up, he gave him this badass scepter that contained another one of the stones, one Thanos already had, and that was the Mind Stone. And Loki knows exactly what the Mind Stone does because he uses it to mind control all sorts of people in his search for the Tesseract, aka the Space Teleporting Stone. Stay with me. Meanwhile, by the way, a doctor under the Mind Stone's mind control uses the Tesseract to open a big portal and bring the Chitauri over. All this stuff, by the way, this is what finally gets the rest of the Avengers involved with all this stone nonsense. And when you realize how late to the game they are, it really shows just how epic the scale of these stones and Thanos' mission are. The Avengers are kind of just a blip in their history so far. So anyway, a bunch of stuff happens on Earth and Loki shows another use for the Mind Stone Scepter. But then a bunch of Avengers get in the way, the Mind Stone and accompanying Scepter get confiscated, and so does eventually the Tesseract. And remember how Odin was a dummy who left it on Earth in the first place? Well, he gets it back for safekeeping on Asgard. And the Scepter containing the Mind Stone, it stays with S.H.I.E.L.D. and they do all sorts of dumb stuff with it. So quick status update here. We've got a Power Stone / orb hidden under an ocean. We've got the Aether also buried and hidden. And pay attention here, we've got the Space Stone now on Asgard, not too far away from where the Aether is being hidden. And then the Mind Stone, that's chilling on Earth with Maria Hill. Now a few years later, this thing called the Convergence happens, and by chance Thor's girlfriend gets infected with the Aether, which awakens the Dark Elves and tells them where it is. Nice job, Jane. So Malekith, back at it again, tries to get the Aether, aka Reality Stone, from Asgard. This time Thor is the one not having it, and their fight leads them back to Earth, of course. Malekith loses, shocker, and Aether goes right back to Asgard. Except now they're smart enough to realize, hey, don't we also have the Tesseract? That's dumb, we shouldn't have those together. So they give the Aether to the Collector. They keep the Tesseract because it helps power the Bifrost Bridge that lets them travel, yada yada. Oh, and real quick, meanwhile on Earth, Hydra gets the Scepter and Mind Stone, of course. They do some weird stuff with it. I think it ends up helping give Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver their powers. Meh, not important. Okay, so now after all that, we finally check in with the orb again. Remember that one? The Power Stone that's just been buried since it was used to exterminate planets? Well, this guy Yondu finds it. It's in a vault on Morag. This other guy, Star-Lord, he's also cool. He also finds it. And then this other guy, Ronan the Accuser, he wants it. There's also Gamora who wants it. And her and Ronan, you can guess who they've been getting their orders from. Yeah, it's Thanos. Again, he's the one that's really after it. So that Star-Lord guy and his buddies, they decide, hey, let's all give our Power Stone to the Collector. Or even better, let's sell it to him and get real rich. But through a lot of plot stuff, hey, the Collector's place gets totally blown up. Now, while the Power Stone, aka Orb, is not lost in the explosion, there is a lot of debate here about what happened to the Aether. Remember, the Collector also had that. And actually, we don't know what happened to it. The director of Guardians, James Gunn, has said, well, maybe the Collector had another museum. And that's it. That's all we know. It could be somewhere else. Meanwhile, the Power Stone Orb ends up on Xandar, and Ronan tries to use it to blow them all up, but he's defeated by the power of dance. And Star-Lord gives the orb to the very respectable Nova Corps for safekeeping. And that's it for the Power Stone, for now. Stay with me, by the way, we're almost totally caught up. So remember back on Earth, Hydra's dicking around with the Mind Stone? Well, Tony Stark takes it back from them, and now he decides to dick around with it, but specifically with regards to AI. He tries it on a robot thing he's made, this little cutie named Ultron. Sounds like Robert California from The Office. And it's supposed to save the world, and spoiler alert, it doesn't. The Mind Stone actually ends up driving Ultron mad because he got too much wisdom from it. Ultron decides, you know what, I want a new bod, so he makes this thing called Vision. He's cool, kind of sounds like Jarvis or the guy from the Da Vinci Code, whatever. Some of our well-meaning but not exactly team player Avengers decide to use that Mind Stone, yes, the same one that made Ultron crazy. They use it on Vision's body and boom, bring him to life, but somehow it doesn't make him crazy. Other than he decides he wants to wear the little Mind Stone on his face as beautiful forehead jewelry. And that's it for the Mind Stone. That's still where it is as of right now. Oh, and now is a good time to remind you that Thor, right around this point, he has a really lame dream. Sorry if you liked it, it was weird. But he basically realizes, hey, there are a lot of these stone things going on. But then nothing happened for a little while. Until last year, when this magical sorcerer guy is training to just be a real good sorcerer, and he gets pretty into this beautiful necklace called the Eye of Agamotto. The cool thing he does with it, he regrows an apple a few times. It's amazing stuff. But also, boom, that reveals to us, hey, that thing made a time loop. It's the time gem. And actually, in this movie, it doesn't really have anything to do with what the bad guy wants, so don't worry about that. However, the sorcerer, Doctor Strange, he does end up doing all sorts of crazy things to bend time back and forth, and he saves the world, but actually no one really knows because he keeps just reversing time. But anyway, that stone is crazy cool. You can go forward or back through time, you can see into the past or future, slow time down, speed it up, age and de-age people and things, and even create time loops and trap people inside of them. Also, supposedly, if they use the comic powers, this stone could make it so you know everything there is to know. We'll see, they haven't really touched on that in the movies. Anyway, Doctor Strange decides to leave that thing hanging out at his training grounds in Nepal, and that's where it is right now. At least he was smart enough to stop wearing it around on display for everyone he meets. You hear that, Vision? Think about it. Anyway, now, the current status for all of them. There's an orb slash power stone with the Nova Corps, a reality stone slash ether that's just MIA, a Tesseract slash space stone on Asgard, a mind stone in some dude's forehead on Earth, and another stone also on Earth, bad idea, the time stone in Nepal. And that's all 5 Infinity Stones. Except if you were listening earlier, I said there are 6. So what's the 6th one? Well, from the comics we know it's gonna be some interpretation of the Soul Gem, and we have no idea where it is. However, there are only a few more movies before Infinity War, and while I think it would be hilarious if the stone were to show up in Spider-Man Homecoming, right now it's more likely in either Guardians 2 or Thor Ragnarok. Of course, it could also not show up at all until Infinity War, but I'm gonna guess that's not gonna be the case. And in fact, here's why I'm guessing it's gonna be in Thor Ragnarok, other than the fact that the plot of that movie begins a possible connection back to Thanos' mission. Back in Guardians 1, we got a glimpse of the colors of the stones, and the Soul Stone is implied to be a nice shade of orange. Now in Asgard, there's this guy Heimdall, and he says he has the ability to see all the souls in the 9 realms. And what would he see that with? Oh, only his orange eyes. And remember that little lame dream vision thing that Thor had, where Thanos has the stones? In it, Heimdall's now blind. So, here's the collective nerd guess at the moment. Heimdall's eyes somehow contain the Soul Stone. Heimdall? Oh, and as for what the Soul Stone can do, well, we don't know what the MCU will have, but it might borrow the Soul Gem properties of being able to collect souls, like steal them from people, attack souls, and access the memories and secrets people hide within their souls. Also, just throwing this out there, Soul Stone could be inside of Mjolnir, since that seems to be able to read the pureness of one's soul. That's just a guess I'm tossing out there, that's just for you. Okay, now you know where most of the stones are and what they do. The only thing we don't know is what will happen if Thanos gets these together and fills out his gauntlet. Just to hype you up, I'll let you know that the gems in the comics put together, they don't just give the owner the aforementioned powers, they actually enhance the powers of the other stones too. Like the Power Stone behind the Mind Stone could make it so the Mind Stone gives the wearer access to all minds, everywhere, all at once. Guys, I hope this is clear. The movie is setting up, with these stones, the most powerful character we've ever seen in a superhero movie, period. I'd say the most powerful character ever, period. But then you got lots of debates to have about Dr. Manhattan and the Living Tribunal and death and God, etc., etc. But again, in movies, I don't think we'll have seen a villain like this before, and considering it took 18 movies to build up to, maybe we won't again. So my questions for you guys: what do you think happened to the Aether when the Collector's Museum blew up? Was it just somewhere else? Also, where do you think the Soul Stone is? Do you buy that Heimdall theory? And finally, do you think Thanos will be successful in filling the gauntlet? I really want him to be, just because I want to see the challenge of the filmmakers having to find a way to show those powers on screen. But let me know if you think they'll do that, or instead make it a last-second success story where the Avengers stop him just in the nick of time. Actually, it would be the Avengers and so many other characters. If you want to know who is and who is not going to be there, make sure to watch those other videos Sam and I did recently. But otherwise, if you want to hear me chat more, why would you want that? But if you do, you can follow my Twitter at Fimo, or hear my thoughts on all sorts of things over at youtube.com/Filup Molina. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with all of your friends, since everyone appreciates a good history lesson. Thanks. Bye-bye. This is the part that is like fresh news to us. Tony Stark senses a greater threat approaching.
Oh, don't print out.
Right.
Ton of not super well thought out smart devices out there. So now I give you the dumbest smart gadgets we've seen so far.